Right, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us and thank you for waiting. What have we got in store for you today? We are going to keep this pretty short and sweet and hope it is useful for everybody. The aim of this session is just so everyone is really clear on the strategy which you as our members put together and our partners, and we'll take you through the highlights of it. And we'll emphasize just a couple of areas that feel particularly important. Let's go on to the session. In a minute, Philip, our chair, is going to speak and give some context for the strategy which we put together on the basis of our members' input. I will then talk to the detail of the four pillars within our strategy. We've then asked one each of our tripartite members, one each of our NGO board members, union board members, and company board members to join us for a short discussion on what's particularly impactful for them in the strategy. We've got a chance after that for the Q&A, as I described before, and then we will definitely finish by 4. We don't want to take up any more of your time than is necessary. So, with that done, we go to the Mentimeter. So please get your phone out and give us one word, ideally, because then we get the grouping. What does a responsible business need most right now? Here we go. So responsible business needs accountability most right now, according to a significant numbers of inputs. Very helpful. Commitment, very strong message. Transparency. Regulation is a hot topic, obviously, with the EU legislation coming in and the UK thinking about it. And a level playing field. Funding. Wow, that's probably all of my buzzwords in the work we do at ETI all in one place. And some very interesting other points there. They keep moving around. Resources, leadership, management buy-in, follow through. Collective bargaining, clear guidance. Thank you. It's extremely helpful, and you'll get a sense of what your fellow audience members are thinking about in here as well. Right, with that as our background, I'm going to ask our board chair, Philip Jennings, to give us some context for the strategy that we've now set as a group for 2030. Philip, over to you.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's with a great sense of relief I speak to you, because having just seen that chart, all those key points that figured in the center of that chart figure in the new strategy of the organization. With these remarks, I aim to set the context for our discussion on the ETI strategy 2026-2030. This is a new era in the life of the ETI, with new leadership, new approaches to problem solving, to growing our membership, and now a new strategy. It is a new era for global supply chains in many respects, reshaped by geopolitical tensions, climate change, changing trade patterns, unpredictable purchasing practices, technological change, and fundamental shifts in the regulatory landscape. These shifts create new risks for workers, but they also present an opportunity for businesses to rethink how supply chains are designed and managed so that resilience and respect for human rights go hand in hand. The new strategy involved widespread consultations with our corporate members, NGOs, and trade unions, and further afield. We had to face the uncomfortable truth that we have not moved the dial sufficiently to improve respect for human rights in supply chains. Millions of workers continued to toil, the majority without a living wage, often facing discrimination, unhealthy workplaces, and a worrying and damaging downward spiral in respect for workers' rights. We hear those workers cry for change. We also hear the call from consumers that they do not want to buy unethical products. Investors, consumers, and regulators are increasingly asking the hard questions to CEOs, their boards, and corporate AGMs about their human rights compliance. At the ETI, we also see a clear spike and increase in companies that our ETI base code is breached. Let's face it, the gap between what companies say and what they can demonstrate is coming harder to hide. The world, friends, is watching. The ETI is unique, not just in experience and policies, but in how we go about our business. It is not one-way traffic. We bring together business, NGOs, and trade unions. We work through complex challenges together with a commitment to practical progress. We are global in our reach. There is no complacency. This combination, tripartite, trusted, collaborative, global, is rare. It is also, in our experience, what moves the needle. Hence our call to action, hence this new strategy, as we face, in Martin Luther King's words, the urgency of now. Our members are clear. We want mandatory due diligence legislation. The dial has shifted 15 years since the UNGPs were adopted. We're about to get EU legislation on the CSDDD. And with an eye to the domestic audience, I hope Andy Burnham is listening as governments around the world introduce their own mandatory legislation on this subject. We say too many human rights programs are still designed and delivered top-down, resulting in nominal compliance rather than real lasting change. Hence our focus on enhanced due diligence measures. The evidence is clear, and I say this with my union background: workers who are empowered to speak up, to organize, collectively bargain, are the most effective safeguards against abuse. When worker experiences shape how we do due diligence, we get better outcomes for workers, for suppliers, and for the businesses that depend on them. Hence a renewed strategic commitment to freedom of association and collective bargaining. In this unstable world, our members consistently tell us how much they value our guidance and practical support on how to respond in times of crisis and conflict. We will strengthen that capacity as we sharpen our procedures for addressing base code violations so that workers affected by crises and harm can access protection and redress while businesses get clear advice in return. To conclude, thank you for your participation today. We enter this new era with renewed determination and a strategy to match. We cannot achieve these goals alone. We are the house of collaboration and cooperation. We are global. We work together for impact. So together, let's make things happen for lasting, systemic change. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Philip. Right, it is my job to follow that with the practicalities. And look, what will I say first of all? The first thing is, when we consulted this strategy, two things were probably particularly noticeable for me. The first is that there was a lot of consensus on what people wanted to retain as an ETI focus. And there was a lot of consensus on what they wanted us to change. And that was change both to change ETI, but also to change the nature of the human rights programs that members were running. And you see that reflected in this strategy. And the easiest way, I think, to understand it is to talk about two areas which are largely based on real ETI strengths over many years, and two areas which are newer and more changed. So if we start off with Pillar 1, we have very strong feedback going out and talking to all our members that the core principle of ETI, that you come in, and if you're a company member, you need to develop and implement human rights due diligence, and ETI is there to support you along that journey, is something that's been very valued. Now, we have changed it. We're strengthening it to making it more and more practical. We're also trying to adapt it so it's really fit for purpose, not just for companies towards the beginning of their journey, but also newer companies who want to join us, who've already got some very strong knowledge along the way. But the principles of what we're doing there are the core And it's a core expectation indeed of anyone who joins this club. There are commitments to this club. They're set out in our member charter. Those haven't changed either. And so that part of our work, that vital part, is largely unchanged with a stronger emphasis on making it as practical and as impactful as possible. The other pillar that did not change very significantly is pillar 3 on collective action. You go back to the beginnings of ETI, 1998. That was a core principle then. It's based on the realization and the ever increasingly widely accepted idea, I think, that serious human rights abuses very rarely can be addressed alone in a lasting way. That's no excuse for individual organizations not to take action. It's just an acceptance that the most complex and widespread serious abuses require more shoulders to the wheel. They require, on the company customer side, more than one company. They absolutely require the involvement from the start of worker representatives, unions, and in many, many cases, NGOs to understand the views of workers and communities. So that pillar is somewhat unchanged. The principle is absolutely fundamental for ETI. We don't think you can do effective human rights due diligence unless you work on complex issues with others. But what has changed within that pillar is we listen very, very closely to the feedback to understand where members really wanted to put that effort and resource. And it came back to us strongly that people wanted us to focus on a combination of the most serious issues, but also issues which underlie a wider set of breaches of the ETI's base code. And so it comes through with a focus on forced labor. I think that's particularly there because members know that there is legislation increasing in this area. We have legislation in the US, we have legislation coming in next year in the EU, and we may have it in the UK and a number of other countries. So that's an explanation of the importance, and it's an ongoing challenge, as we know, in so many supply chains. We have a focus on gender equity, because I think the more that many of us have worked in unions, in NGOs, and in companies, and indeed in the ETI Secretariat, the more that many of us have worked on these issues, the more we've understood that understanding the gender impacts and difference is fundamental and working to address that. And then we have worker representation, which I'm going to come back to, but we also have just transition. So the impact of climate, both on existing industries and ensuring that we develop fair industries in those new emerging parts of industries in response to climate change, from waste collection through to renewable energy industries. So those are the two pillars which are not significantly changed. The two that have changed are pillar 2, and this is probably the most important thing that we can say about this strategy that feels different to us in the Secretariat to what has gone before. The analysis which came back to us from our members, and I have to say, really links with, I think, what so many of us in the Secretariat team and on the board have seen, is that there's been lots and lots of effort and often some good practice over the last 20, 30 years on human rights programs. But as Philip said, we aren't turning the dial enough. And when you stand back and you analyze so many efforts, people with largely goodwill have entered into things which feel scalable, but they've entered into approaches which are still too much top down. I feel very much that was my own experience of trying to address these issues when I worked for an ETI company member, is that it's very hard to get beyond those sort of audit focused and top down messages. But what we've ended up with too much is action which doesn't lead to lasting change because it's difficult. But the cornerstone of that is talking to the people who actually understand the problems and who are best placed to understand what fixes it. And there was recognition across our consultations that we have to put workers back at the heart of human rights due diligence efforts at every stage. Some of this will be supported by legislation. You look at the incoming EU legislation, it talks about the need for meaningful stakeholder engagement. So a legal requirement that you are actually putting stakeholders, particularly workers, at the heart. And we will work on that closely with all our partners. The ideal form of that is freedom of association, and we believe that all efforts should be heading towards freedom of association where they're not really already there. But we will work to ensure that there is an effective representation and an effective voice for workers in all supply chains, including where they're most vulnerable, which, no coincidence, is largely where there isn't union representation, and particularly thinking about seasonal and migrant workers. So our work, our strategy has taken that and we've turned that into practical actions because we know that the solutions need to be scalable and achievable, and we absolutely believe they can be, and that will be at the heart of the strategy in everything we do. The final pillar just to talk about is crisis preparedness and response. And the reason for that is we got quite a lot of feedback from company members that they particularly valued the advice they get from ETI and from other members of ETI as well as the Secretariat where there are crises, earthquakes, political instability, other climate impacts. So hearing from worker representatives, hearing from companies, hearing from suppliers to understand the nature of it, giving clear advice on what action should be taken is very valued. We also got a lot of feedback from our NGO and our union members that they wanted to be more confident that where key issues are coming up, that they are addressed in a systemic and credible way. And we know that our company members, most of you who I talk to, are getting more and more serious breaches reported to you. I have to say, I think that is absolutely a sign of success in programs and identifying problems rather than an indication of growing intrinsic problems, but it's giving us all a sense of the scale of the challenge. And so we will weave those things together to be more helpful in guidance on how to address serious issues and serious breaches, but also ensure that there is more confidence that those things are being addressed by all our members. So that's the core of the strategy set by you. And I'd love to have more time to talk about it, but we're going to move on quickly because the idea is you get some practical insight today and then get the chance to ask questions about anything you hear. So we're going to open up a panel now, and we have 3 of our board members, as I discussed before, and I have questions for each of them, but I'm just going to go around and invite those colleagues on the ETI board to introduce themselves very briefly. So we'll go in line, first Stephen, then Sophie, and then Nikki. So over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Giles, and hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm Stephen Russell. I've worked at the TUC for a very, very long time, and I've been an ETI board member since 2018, I think. I'm our International Labour Standards lead, and as you know, the International Labour Standards, particularly those set out at the International Labour Organization, are absolutely fundamental to our mission as they inform the base code and everything else, and our understanding of what human rights at work truly mean. So I lead our relationship with the ILO, but I'm also extremely proud to lead our relationship with the Ethical Trading Initiative. Anyway, it's nice to be here.
And then me. Hello, everyone. I'm Sophie Brill, and I'm the head of ethics at Oxfam GB. Oxfam have also been members of the ETI since the very beginning, but I think I'm here today and Oxfam is still an active member of the ETI because we still believe that it's the leading route for businesses who have a genuine commitment to respecting human rights, and that's enabled by its unique tripartite model. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you, everybody. Hi, Nikki Woodhead. I look after sustainability for WH Smith. Not the high street anymore, but we still have an awful lot of stores in travel locations. So a really, really broad mix of products. I've been at Smiths for 8 years, so very much a kind of member and active participant with the ETI since that time. And unlike Stephen, I am very new to the board, so I've only joined this month, but I'm really, really looking forward to getting stuck into the strategy and seeing where that goes over the next few years.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nikki. And I'm going to say to everybody who's on the call, it's fantastic to have our members volunteer to be board members, and we won't always do what we've just done to Nikki, which is get her straight on in front of everybody before she's even attended one of our board meetings yet. So a particular thank you to you, Nikki. Right. I am going to turn to you, Sophie, first. And the question it'd be great to get your sense of is where have you seen progress in recent years and what still needs to change?
Yeah, I think you and Philip have touched on a couple of things already. I think, at a high level, we've seen much more recognition of human rights and the idea that accountability is needed to ensure that those rights are respected. We've had increased transparency, I think, in terms of both policies and commitments, and some progress reported transparently as well, which has provided some evidence that businesses are increasingly engaging with workers and other rights holders through impact assessments and, in some cases, stronger grievance mechanisms. But I think that despite those commitments and the positive action that is being taken by responsible companies, the kind of uncomfortable truth, which I think you touched on, Giles, is that it feels like we aren't really seeing the evidence that all of that work that is being done is translating into impact for workers. And I think there are a number of things that are contributing to that, but to pull out a few, I think too little progress on freedom of association. And, if we can really crack that one as the sort of one of the key enabling rights, I believe that will unlock some of the challenges on things like living wages that we've also been struggling with for a long time. There's more to be done on purchasing practices, things like ensuring that companies are paying enough for goods that includes covering the rights of those workers, and that crucially, if businesses or suppliers are making those changes and improvements, suppliers aren't leaving them when they become more expensive as a result. We need more effective grievance mechanisms that are inclusive and accessible to rights holders, and better coordination between those mechanisms. And finally, though not finally, but finally for now, we need to see remediation where harm is caused. From Oxfam's work in the seafood industry, we've had several instances that we've seen of large-scale abuses in seafood supply chains, but no cases of remediation that we can point to. So, yeah, that's a summary.
Thank you very much, Sophie. I'd be fascinated to know anyone else's views when we get to the Q&A on that bit. But for now, I am going to turn to you, Stephen. Where do you think businesses still need to shift their approach if workers are truly going to be at the centre as per our new strategy?
Thanks, Giles. It's difficult to fit a one-size-fits-all approach for so many companies. You're all in different stages of your journey, as it's sometimes said. And some of you might have heard this before, and indeed may be acting on it. I certainly hope so. But I know from talking to some of you that there's a common view that despite the commitments of the base code, which are themselves rooted in the ILO standards I talked about, that there is some sort of duty on you to be even-handed about unionization. I won't go through the arguments here. You'll be delighted to know this is not a lecture, but you can and should be full-throated in your support for trade union recognition and collective bargaining as the internationally recognized gold standard in ensuring decent work. You can be interventionist. Whilst you rightly cannot compel or induce workers to join one, you should certainly also stay out of the question of which union they should join. An enabling environment for union organising is much easier to achieve if you're willing to insist on a positive message. Conversely, in the absence of an equal power dynamic, neutrality always risks being read as discouragement. So I think that's a real shift. Embrace your right to be positive, show trust and understand that you are giving space for something to grow, not designing it. It's out of your direct control, but you can support it. Unions are a product of our environment. Engaging in good faith more often than not generates the same response from workers. That's the most important point, and I had to put it first because on a call like this, you never know whether you're going to get a phone call or someone's going to be distracted by a needy cat. But it's not necessarily the first step. So I'll backtrack a little bit because I know why some of you are nervous about trust. There are no unions who never talk to employers. how would we do our job? But sadly, there are many employers who have never spoken to trade unions. It's the inevitable consequence of the decline of collective bargaining coverage in most of the world. That means some of you will have less experience of working with trade unions than others of you, and that can be a problem. From overcoming prejudices to understanding what will go down well in a negotiation, actually meeting and engaging with trade unionists on a regular basis demystifies them and their fundamental role in securing fair and decent work. Fortunately, you're in ETI, or for those of you who aren't, you could be and should be, and have access to our vast international networks that stretch into almost every country and every sector. Seek out trade unions, talk to them, talk to us. We're right here and can help you be put in touch with unions almost anywhere. Not always quickly, I will admit, but we can. And as some of you have heard me say before, if you want to talk to a trade unionist anywhere, start with the one closest to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. And look, one of the things that came through quite strongly in a lot of the consultation meetings was that, yeah, some companies are more comfortable with that than others, but there's recognition that what ETI offers is a safe space for those conversations, and it's a good place for them to start. Nikki, we'll turn to you if that's all right. What practical value do you feel the strategy offers companies facing increasing due diligence requirements and increasing supply chain disruption?
So I think that safe space point is a really, really important, valid point. I've always felt that membership of ETI provides a safety blanket. It's not always comfortable. There's the right element of challenge. There's always things to be working on, but we get to work alongside like-minded businesses, NGOs and trade unions with leading experts, sharing problems and solving challenges together that would be really difficult to address on our own. So I think the strategy from a business perspective, provided that if we fully engage with that and everything that it asks, and we follow advice and the guidance laid out with it and actively participate with other members, we should feel reasonably confident that we're doing many of the things that we need to be doing. And that can be in relation to compliance. It can be in relation to a duty of care to the workers in the supply chain. And quite often it's because it makes commercial sense to have those engaged, well-rewarded, involved supply chain workers. We're facing a time of huge disruption in the workplace from all sorts of changes that are happening really rapidly. I think we'll see major change continue in relation to automation and AI, the effects of climate, and the always present shareholder pressures for financial returns. So I think the strategy provides businesses with a really comprehensive framework to ensure that all of the necessary groundwork is in place to be ready for those changes. So a really proactive, up-to-date response to everything that might hit us in the next few years.
Brilliant, Nikki, thank you. I am going to fit in one quick more question before we go to Q&A for all three of you. But just a reminder for colleagues on this webinar, if you want to ask a question, anything that's on your mind about the strategy or about ETI, click the Q&A button. If it's not on the bottom banner as you scroll down, then if you click the three buttons, you'll find it through there. The question I've got is, let's assume we deliver all of this smoothly with our members collectively. If we get this strategy right, what will look different come 2030? So I'll go back in the same order. Sophie, going to you first.
Yeah, it's hard not to want to jump to that answer in a way that sounds like a sort of imaginary scenario, and then you realise that's 3.5 years ago. So to try and be more pragmatic, I think what we'd really like to see is that some evidence that businesses are engaging with stakeholders, and that engagement is then informing the day-to-day decision making and the action that takes place, and then the learning that is then informing new actions, and some more of that connection between the work that's being done and the decisions being made by businesses.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Stephen, what's your sense? What will look different by 2030? We've lost your voice, I think, Stephen.
I clicked it and then I must have double clicked it. I apologize. I was just saying, as much as like Sophie, I like to believe that everything will be wonderful and we'll have a workers' utopia if we succeed in our strategy. I realize I should probably be slightly more focused. Um, the strategy talks about social dialogue and the critical link between collective bargaining and living wages. If we get this right, it will become second nature to all of us to rely on social dialogue. And as the ILO recognized again this summer, when it comes to practical impact, that means collective bargaining. And it's the only proven way to drive wages and conditions to decent levels on the scale necessary for ETI and its members to achieve our aims. And it is the best way to lock in protections for workers. And so if we can build that trust between companies and unions, and that's including between ETI member companies and ETI member unions, if we can start that journey to extending collective bargaining across our supply chains, then we will be putting workers truly at the centre. And if that succeeds, you have a great chance to realise also the third outcome of Pillar 2, in that you will have supported the development of thousands of partner organisations that can help you carry out due diligence, flag problems before they get out of control, and unlock all sorts of other benefits of a real social partnership. Utopia works both ways, I suppose. Thanks.
Thank you. And maybe it's worth saying that look, we don't have very much time today to get into the detail. On the back of the strategy we consulted, we've developed a very clear, more detailed work plan for the 4 years ahead, and we've made that available. But it's got very practical measures in it to try and turn these ambitions into practical, achievable ways for people to work together. But if you've got ever any questions as members, just come through to any of us in the team, and we'll really happily do it. Nikki, coming to you last, and then I'm going to open it up for the wider Q&A. What do you think will look different in 2030 if we deliver this?
So there's some things in there that I'm really excited about, and ever the optimist. I think having the member working group to promote worker representation and freedom of association is really exciting. I think particularly for those countries where the policy framework makes unionisation more challenging, it's what can we do to kind of work together to get worker voice brought into kind of our plans to make those systemic changes. Kind of linked to that, I guess, the tripartite in China, I think, is a great step forward. You know, we've been talking for, well, as long as I've been a member, around some of the challenges in Asia sourcing around working hours and social security. So I can't say we're going to fix those by 2030, but if we could at least get a bit more progress in the right direction, I think that would be a great success. And then I think some of those kind of newer challenges that I alluded to before, I think if we are able to demonstrate that we have been able to organise ourselves as a membership organisation to begin to understand those challenges, to fully face into them, and to begin to come up with some solutions for workers in our supply chains, then that would be a great success too.
Thank you very much, Nikki, and thank you to Stephen and Sophie as well. We will now release you from the pressure of sharing your views, and I'm going to shift instead to sharing the burden of the pressure with Philip back as our chair, with Kate, who many of you will know, head of membership services and communications, and with Danny, also many of you will know, head of collective action. So here we go. We are going to open ourselves up for the questions that have come in so far. And I could be really mean, but the first one that was come through, I'm going to volunteer to take myself, which is a question about what's going to happen with legislation and what does it mean for ETI? Well, hopefully many of you are familiar that we did a big consultation, actually concluded in September last year, and developed a surprisingly very clear position in support of mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence. And that had within it 10 key features that we felt legislation to include. And we've used that position to base our advocacy in the UK, trying to push for that legislation, and in the EU in our response to, for example, guidance around EU CSDD that many of you familiar with, and where we've just done a more detailed consultation on some of the more detailed answers. So it's been helpful to us. Look, I thought it was really interesting that members so strongly came out in favour of legislation, but it does make sense for our members, including our company members, because if you're a member of ETI, you are already committed to human rights due diligence. And it's clearly helpful if you have more of your competition still there. That's partly a fairness issue because sometimes it does feel like a burden, but more than anything, it's more shoulders to the wheel to be able to make progress. So when it comes to the question about what does it mean for ETI, I mean, it's a huge opportunity. It's a shame that the EU legislation is only for companies with a large turnover. With the UK, there is still the opportunity that may be a lower threshold, and all those details are still to be fought for. But we see it as purely positive for our opportunity to drive progress in line with the mission. So that's all I'm going to say on that one. And so I'm going to share the burden and put one separately and put it to you, Kate, first of all. How will the ETI assess members against this strategy?
Thanks, Giles. Hi, everyone. Yeah, for anyone who hasn't met me before, I'm Kate. I'm head of membership at ETI. So the 4 pillars that Giles presented earlier, we've set against each of those pillars clear KPIs with targets. So some of those will be monitoring in terms of the work that we are responsible for delivering, and some of them are about what we achieve with our members. So throughout the course of each year of that strategy, under each pillar, we have monitoring mechanisms that we will work to collate data and assess our performance and our members' performance within each of those 4 pillars. And we'll be sharing with members in sessions about what those look like, and they'll be much more familiar with that. We have things such as the Corporate Transparency Framework, which is one of our progress monitoring frameworks that we use. But yeah, we have KPIs across the strategy that we'll be monitoring each year.
Thank you, Kate. And I know that one question that's sometimes come up in the past, probably particularly from our NGO members, is about that wider sense of accountability. And it's just a reminder that whether you are an ETI union member, an NGO member, or a company member, there is a member charter of commitments which people make to us on their membership. And we do hold people to account on that. Often that's done a bit more behind the scenes and in quieter conversations. Occasionally you'll see that become public, but there is a clear breach process which we have, base code violations process, which is a key part of our accountability. Danny, I'm going to come to you next. So we mentioned before meaningful stakeholder engagement, which I always think of as being exactly what it actually says on the tin, but it's been written into the EU legislation. How will ETI help companies embed meaningful stakeholder engagement in their approach?
Yeah, thanks, Giles. And I don't think we should overlook how important it is that it's been built into legislation. Having UNGP language enshrined in legislation for the first time is massively powerful. But I think another thing to remember is that many of our members, many companies out there have already been successfully implementing meaningful stakeholder engagement under different names and particularly through their work with ETI, right? So the terminology is not new, but ETI's whole approach and structure is designed to deliver worker-led, meaningful stakeholder engagement at all points of the human rights due diligence cycle. That's what we exist to do, right? So MSE done properly, I think, as we all recognize, is hugely beneficial. Look, first and foremost, it's about delivering and ensuring fundamental rights that are respected in and out of the workplace, but building that trust, treating people decently, gaining genuine insight into the impacts of corporate actions leads to more resilient, more sustainable, and ultimately more commercially successful supply chains that are aligned with legislation, which is a key driver for many businesses now. I think the key to embedding it in complex supply chains, which several of our members and non-members recognize, is making it practical and scalable. And ETI have been working hard over the last year We've been working in collaboration rather than isolation. I think it's critical we do that with other organizations to make sure we're not duplicating effort. We've got a consistent approach, and we've been able to produce two really important documents. So there's practical guidance in the apparel and textile sector we developed with our Stitch partners. And more recently, we've launched practical guidance in food and agri supply chains with an alliance of MSIs and NGOs as well. So I think we also have large-scale projects at ETI on the go, proactive initiative work across apparel and textiles and food and farming. So look, the short answer to how our members embed it is to lean in to ETI membership and work closely with us. We have the answers, and we're here to collectively help them address them.
Good.
Annie, thank you very much. Right, moving swiftly on to the next question. We're reaching the last couple, so if anybody's got a desperately urgent one, stick it in the Q&A. Here's a question in from Bev Hall. Hi, Bev. Are there plans to build the capacity of company members to maximize their influence and roll out ETI strategy to sourcing in production countries, i.e., cascade to suppliers and to their suppliers? Very, very interesting. Kate, I might ask you to chip in on that in a moment. My own reflections on that is that's playing to a live debate we're having at the moment within the Secretariat, because we are getting this question more and more for companies about how do you help sort of roll this out. Fine, it's easy for many people and companies as well as unions and NGOs to analyze that audits have some value, but they're not achieving the level of change requested. But how do we roll out more of that due diligence approach into the supply chain? We are looking about that and about how we can, potentially adapt what we do so it will also bring more suppliers into the ETI debate and into ETI membership. Kate, anything else worth saying on that at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, just to add, I mean, we've got two members already within the ETI membership who are suppliers, one in Kenya and one in Bangladesh. So we've been able to learn from that and build on that. I think having more discussions directly with suppliers about what they need and building that kind of adapted way of membership for suppliers is the step we'd probably take next.
And then another question, Kate, probably one for you again. How can non-members engage with ETI and the strategy? I mean, the only answer I've got to that is in any way in which you want, and we really welcome it. But Kate, you probably got a more professional answer than that.
I agree with Giles's point, but also, yeah, we have the ability to provide training to non-members. We've got a very popular course that individuals join if they're new on their human rights journey, and that's available to non-members. And also we can offer bespoke training to non-members, companies who want to experience how ETI works and get a sense of that tripartite approach to any project that we work on. And then I guess the third way is, yeah, have a conversation with us about joining.
Right, I'm going to hijack this whole system and ask the one last question, and I'm going to ask it to Philip because I've been meaning to ask this, Philip, in one of our one-to-ones, and I keep forgetting it. And sorry to hit you with it in front of other people, but you and I joined ETI at about the same time. I came from a big corporate. You came from running a massive global union. What has surprised you most about ETI since you've joined, for good or for bad?
Your eagerness to change, not to hide from the realities that workers face, to be frank to the members about the need to improve. And in a very difficult climate, that there is great ambition within the Secretariat and great ambition within the board to seek change. You know, these multi-stakeholder initiatives get a lot of bad press, that we ain't real, we're not quick to react, that if we got a problem, we try to hide it, brush it under the carpet and pretend the world is fine. I've not seen one single piece of evidence that that's the case with the ETI. This is a real place with real discussions. When issues are brought to our attention, we address them. We try informally. I know Giles has been on the blower to many companies without waiting to go through due process and all the rest of it, just to alert them to what is going on, the need to change the way things are, and also to find a remedy. I wasn't sure if you would be ready for freedom of association and collective bargaining in the manner that you are, and you've proven otherwise. And above all, what I want to see, though, we have to grow membership. Kate, we had lots of conversations about this. Anyone that's sitting on the sidelines, umming and ahhing about whether we should or we shouldn't, it's time to join. The world is changing. This world is networked. Laws are changing. Consumers are demanding more. Whatever the anti-woke scene is happening, this is temporary. People want an ethical world with ethical products, and we're part of the solution. We're in the solutions business, and that's impressed me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Philip, thank you. And thank you to Danny and to Kate as well. So we need to move to wrap up. Philip, is there anything else you want to share before we close on today?
Oh, me?
Yes.
Well, I spent a lot of time in South Africa. I met Nelson Mandela on a number of occasions. So I like this quote when he said, "There is no passion to be found playing small in settling for life that is less than the one you are capable of living." When I look at the ETI, we're not playing small. We are global. We're not prepared to settle for how things are. There's an ambition to improve our work and our action, to improve our membership, to improve our ability to have impact. And above all, that we always have in mind that we are here to improve the lives of millions of workers in cooperation with business and NGOs. To those people who manufacture the products, who provide the services, the clothes we wear and the food we eat. Let's get this job done. We may not get it all done by 2030, but let's get on the way to get this job done by 2030 and to put the doubters to rest once and for all. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Philip. Right. It just remains for me to say a couple of things before we close and give you the rest of your day back. I mean, the first is obviously thank you for spending your time with us. Hopefully this has been useful, but we have loads of ways in which if you want more information, there's stuff on the website, there's stuff on the ETI community website for members. Please get in touch with any of us, and we're there for it. The strategy process was really helpful, but the bit that we spent a long time on internally and talking to many of our members about is how we turn it into practical action. So we haven't had the chance to go into a lot of that today, but I do want members to go away with confidence that we have some high ambition, but we are very, very mindful that real change comes from being very practical, very tangible, and simple to work with, and that's our commitment to you. Philip mentioned we want to grow, and it is true. So for our existing members, why does it make sense for ETI to grow? We can do more. I mean, it's also more of a level playing field for you, but fundamentally, the more shoulders that we have to the wheel, the more we can actually deliver in everybody's interest. So please do encourage others to join. For prospective members who are on the call today, just talk to us. I mean, many of you already have been. And everybody should know that we are working really hard to be as flexible and as useful as we can. We occasionally even have special offers. I won't say more, but come and talk to us about what that might be. And obviously, look, we haven't spoken about it today, but a key part of the impact, particularly when ETI has made a really good impact in the last few years on a number of great examples, it's been thanks in part also to donors and funders. So we've been really grateful for that support and look forward to continuing that partnership. A lot of the aid funding world has obviously changed quite a lot in the last 18 months, but there are still some very, very committed and valuable donors and funders out there. And, we look forward to that. So download the strategy, stay involved in the conversation, contact us any way in which you want, follow us on LinkedIn. The future of global supply chains will be shaped partly by the choices we make, and a strategy is our commitment to ensure that workers' rights are at the centre of those choices. Thank you very much, and hopefully see everybody in various fora soon.